Hulk Hogan, he was a real American, baby. And damn shame. Damn shame. Deaths come in threes, but I was told by Tony Bruno and Miss Robin that it was four this week. But, growing up as a kid in the 80s and watching wrestling and WrestleMania, and when Hulk Hogan took on the Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov, and obviously his big rival was Roddy Piper, and they didn't like each other in real life when they were wrestlers, and then they became good friends, and they used to text every day until Roddy Piper passed. But I was at the RNC this summer, as I mentioned, when Hogan took the stage. And we were joking, or we've had this joke on the show with Linda McMahon that I was the inspiration for that, because I did an interview with Linda McMahon, and then I told her how I was a kid who grew up loving Hulk Hogan, and then she picked up her phone, started texting somebody, and the next thing you know, it was announced that Hogan was speaking at the RNC. It was not one of the planned guests. So we've taken credit for that ever since, and we always will, because, that's how we do things. But I'm curious if you ever got to see Hulk Hogan wrestle at WrestleMania, or if you ever met him. So let me know, 855-839-1210. And I just think it was, I don't know, it's the end of an era that was just a fun, the 80s wrestling was fun, and World Wrestling Federation back then, as it was called, before it became WWE. And Hogan was the guy with the American flag, and he was the real American, and, so he gets up at the RNC, the Republican National Convention, and he delivers a speech. It's 9 minutes long, and the crowd goes crazy as soon as he walked into the arena, because he walked in like it was a wrestling event. And he's carrying the American flag as he's walking in, and obviously the media, the corporate legacy media, hates that. They hate the idea that the Hulkster's having some fun. And by the way, the president put out a statement on the Hulk's passing, and I'll get to that in just a second as well. But he lit up the room. He lit up the crowd. I mean, that's what he did. He was a showman of the utmost degree. But for him, it was personal. And he sat down with Bret Baier before he, because he had a personality where he could obviously turn it up, but he could turn it off too. And we remember him in Rocky III as Thunder Lips, and then after the fight, he walks over and shakes Rocky's hand. And so he was a normal guy, but he was a performer. He was an entertainer. But he sat down with Bret Baier, and he explained why he wanted to be there, why he wanted to talk to the RNC. And I believe if this is, which one is this now, Matt? Is this with Bret?
21.
21? All right, cut 21.
Behind you. You're going to speak to him.
I can't wait. This is going to be like body slamming the giant at WrestleMania.
What brought you out here? Why are you here?
Well, Brett, I got tired of remaining silent. I sat back and watched the borders collapse. I watched the economy collapse. I watched the price of gas, the price of food, everything just do an upside down flip. And when they took a shot at my hero, Donald Trump, I realized that I couldn't be silent anymore. I had to step up. I had to be a real American, just like all these real Americans here in Donald Trump. I have a voice too, and I want people to know it's time to talk. It's time not to be silent anymore.
I saw your
So the president put out a statement on Truth Social a short time ago. He said, "We lost a great friend today, the Hulkster. Hulk Hogan was MAGA all the way, strong, tough, smart, but with the biggest heart. He gave an absolutely electric speech at the Republican National Convention that was one of the highlights of the entire week. He entertained fans from all over the world, and the cultural impact he had was massive. To his wife, Sky, and family, we gave our warmest, best wishes and love. Hulk Hogan will be greatly missed." And he actually became a Christian last week, too, which I didn't realize. But so I wanted to play this for you. This is from the Republican National Convention when he said, "Let Trump-a-mania run wild." So let's go cut number 20, RNC speech. Take a listen.
What happened last week when they took a shot at my hero and they tried to kill the next president of the United States? Enough was enough, and I said, let Trump-a-mania run Trump-a-mania, make America great again.
He rips his shirt off, does the thing with the ear to the crowd, which was his famous thing back in the day. You know what I mean? But they loved it, and it was great showmanship. It was fantastic. And it's funny too because the criticism that they're like, "Oh my God, Hulk Hogan spoke at the RNC." Yeah, because you know how many working class people went to wrestling events? A lot. Like I mean, that was what we did. I went to WrestleMania. I loved WrestleMania. I loved wrestling. They had a cartoon. I had the thumb wrestling figures. I had the action figures. I loved wrestling. Me and my buddies would make a wrestling magazine. It was huge for growing up in that time. So if you were there at the RNC and Hulk Hogan's up there at the RNC and he's fired up about what they did to President Trump, it's a big deal. But let's understand Linda McMahon, who is the queen of wrestling, who built the empire, is now the education secretary, as we all know. But she was in the president's first cabinet. President Trump was involved with the World Wrestling Entertainment for years. He made all kinds of different appearances there, and you know he was close to McMahon. She served as his SBA director during the first administration. Now her job is to get herself out of a job by body slamming the Department of Education out of existence. So Linda McMahon sat down with me at the RNC and we did an interview, and this is when she called the show after, and I joked with her and said that, it was kind of my idea of why Hulk spoke at the RNC, and she played right along with the joke, but cut 22. When you were with me at the Republican National Convention, you remember you came on my show. It was a Monday. We had a great chat. We caught up. It was wonderful to see you again. We had a really nice talk, and you did a great interview on the show. And then when the interview ended, we took some pictures together, and I made a comment to you about how I loved Hulk Hogan growing up. He was one of my heroes. And then Hulk Hogan shows up Thursday night at the Republican National Convention. Linda McMahon, can I take credit for Hulk Hogan showing up at the RNC?
Oh, absolutely. Take full credit for it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, because I have been in my head for the whole time, but I was hoping you could confirm that for us. So you've done me a big favor here. I can't thank you enough. You made my day.
You're so welcome.
Obviously, probably was not my idea, but nevertheless, she was more than happy to play along with it. But she got the joke. Hulk got the joke. President Trump gets a joke too. And the power of entertainment and the power of the fact that Hulk was the champion for America in the 80s when he would wrestle people like Nikolai Volkov. So I want to actually play. I mean, I think it's significant. I really do. For a lot of people growing up in that era, and it was the East versus the West. It was America versus Russia versus the Soviet Union. So before this fight that he had with Nikolai Volkov, they asked him, remember Mean Gene? So they asked him why he was going to fight him. And I'm only going to play a little bit of this for you right now. I'll play more of it later, but this is cut 26. Take a listen to this.
I can't stand to see our enemy's flag in the ring. That's why I'm carrying the red, white, and blue, brother. I'm proud of America. I stand for this country. And I'm going to promise you one thing. When this fight is over tonight, there's only going to be one flag standing. That's the Stars and Stripes forever.
Nikolai Volkov, perhaps sensing
There
victory.
you go. So he won. Hulk won the fight, obviously. And it was a big deal. But that's what I mean. It was that the nostalgia when Hulk came at the RNC, it was back that whole, we can be America and the Stars and Stripes. And it was a nostalgia for people that mattered. It really did. And it was saying, hey, we can love our country. He was a symbol of that for a lot of kids who grew up in the 80s, Gen X. It was a symbol of that, because back then it was East versus West. It was communism versus the United States. And a lot of those themes played out, believe it or not, in wrestling, in the World Wrestling Federation, the WWF back then. Same thing with the Iron Sheik, being the guy from Iran. Same thing. It was that. So when he spoke at the RNC and everybody went wild, people loved it. I mean, it was really, really fun. And the president spoke and thanked him at the RNC after that close to 10-minute speech that the Hulkster gave at the convention. This is cut 25.
About the Hulkster, how good was he? Is he? Where is he? Boy, oh boy. You know, they may call that entertainment. I know about entertainment, but when he used to lift a 350-pound man over his shoulders and then bench press him 2 rows into the audience, I say maybe entertainment, but he is one strong son of a gun. I will tell you, I watched it many times. There aren't a lot of entertainers that can do that, right? You were fantastic.
That's very true. He was. And one of the more memorable speakers at the RNC, along with the just everyday people that spoke, unlike the DNC where it was all celebrities. It was all highly paid celebrities. And one thing I heard Tony Bruno talk about, and again, if you have any memories of Hulk, make Matt DeSantis work, call the show, 855-839-1210, 855-839-1210. Give me your favorite Hulk Hogan memory, because I want to share in this with you, because this is our childhood, at least my childhood anyway. 855-839-1210. But I was listening to Tony Bruno, and Robin take calls on this, Ed. A woman called up and said she met Hulk at the vet, and he pulled up and just parked his car in the parking lot, and she walked right over to him and said hello. He was just a very down-to-earth, regular guy. And people that knew Hulk Hogan knew that he was like that. So that's a big deal, and sad to lose him, no doubt about that. Oh, and Governor Ron DeSantis was giving a speech about Hulk Hogan's passing, and some insane leftists started screaming profanities. This is cut number 19.
About the Hulkster.
Cut 19.
Yeah, I was sad to see the news that Hulk Hogan passed away today. He was a major icon for anybody in Gen X. I can tell you, growing up then in the 80s and particularly the early 90s, he was really big. And he actually really was a star first before even he was Hulk-a-mania, but when he was Thunder Lips in Rocky III. And that was like a huge deal. I mean, obviously that was a great movie franchise with Sylvester Stallone. So he was Thunder Lips, and then a couple years later became the World Wrestling Federation heavyweight champion. And, you know, as a young kid, like, you know, I'm growing up and it's like, you know, that was like somebody's like, wow, that's our superhero kind of deal. And the fact that he was from a Tampa Bay area when I'm growing up there, I was like, oh my gosh, like this guy lives in our area. And, you know, back then when they would do these big events like WrestleMania, you could go to it, which obviously I wasn't in a position to be able to go to, but they didn't have even pay-per-view where you would pay for it to come on the cable. They had closed circuit, so you could go to like a venue and they would play it on like a really big screen. And so like the first few WrestleManias, I think, were like that. And I remember WrestleMania 3, he was up, hey, stop. Get out of here. 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 So you used to have the closed circuit. So you would go and you would have that, and then you'd just kind of watch it. So I just remember like WrestleMania 3, he's fighting Andre the Giant. And look, I was a kid. I didn't know that it was choreographed, right? I mean, I was like really worried that he was going to be able to.
I didn't know it was choreographed. None of us did. We all thought it was real. We did as kids. We thought it was real. So in that fight with Nikolai Volkov, when I thought he was going to lose, and then in the end he winds up doing that thing. Hulk used to do this thing where you'd punch him, and he would stand there, and he would seem to get stronger as you punched him, as you shoved him, and it seemed like he was getting more powerful. And obviously that was choreographed, but at the time they didn't know that. They were just like, oh my God, they're punching Hulk. They're punching the Hulk, and he's getting stronger. And then he would throw him off the ropes, and then he would come down on him with his elbow. You know what I mean? And then pin him, and then the American flag would come out and Hulk would start waving that flag. Oh, it was great. It was great. So symbolic of the 80s. Really was. So if you're a kid like Ron DeSantis was, and I was during all that, then the guy comes and speaks at the RNC and backs Trump, you feel like that's... Remember how I told you how the Democrats have a problem with guys, with men? And it seems like all the alpha males in the world they're with the Republicans now. They're with Trump. They're with the... You know what I mean? Like if you're an alpha male, well, it doesn't get more alpha male than Hulk Hogan. It doesn't get more alpha than professional wrestlers, or nowadays it's really UFC. I mean, UFC has kind of taken over in that sense. Dana White and UFC, and they're doing a UFC fight on the South Lawn of the White House, which I know some people are offended by that idea. They don't like the idea of the South Lawn being used for that. I get that point. But I think the UFC has kind of eclipsed wrestling nowadays anyway, in terms of its popularity. And Trump goes to all these UFC fights, and when he walks in, the place goes wild. And these UFC fighters now, you talk about alpha males. And when Trump walks into a UFC fight, the crowd goes wild. You know where all those voters are. And I would argue, without really doing any scientific polling, that most of the people there, even though those tickets get very, very expensive, but the bulk of the people there work for a living. And by work for a living, I mean they have a job that's outside of a faculty lounge. They're not a professor of something. They're not a professor of gender studies. In fact, those people that are probably want to see UFC shut down because, oh, it's barbaric, and they're promoting violence, our violent culture, and look at the symbolism of the West with its violence against the colonial indigenous people. Like, what? It's just the two guys getting on stage beating the hell out of each other for a lot of money. And UFC is real. Unlike wrestling, it's real. But anyway, Drew's in Mount Laurel. Drew, thanks for the call. What's going on?
Hey, Rich. Just wanted to share my favorite Hulk Hogan moment, and that was when he appeared in Rocky III as Thunder Lips, the exhibition match that Rocky put on, and then Rocky thought it was going to be an exhibition match, but Thunder Lips had other ideas and winds up, slamming him down and knocking him around, and then picking him up and throwing him down in the audience about 4 or 5 rows in.
Great scene.
That was great.
That was fantastic. Thunder Lips. You can't forget that scene in Rocky III. That was key.
Yep, that was awesome. That's my memory of Hulk.
Thank you, Drew. Thanks for the call, buddy.
Anytime.
Appreciate it. Kim's in Bucks County. Kim, how are you?
Hi, good, Rich. How are you?
Doing well.
My memory of Hulk, first of all, I'm in my mid-50s, so I grew up watching him, watching WrestleMania. Was going to Kitty City down in Fairless Hills and getting his autograph. Waiting probably a good 2 to 3 hours when I was 10 years old with my dad. And just seeing him in person like that was amazing.
And was he nice when you met him?
He was. I mean, obviously, it was very quick. There was a lot of people there, a lot of frustrated parents. I seen him down at the old Spectrum down in Philly twice. I was a big wrestling fan growing up. I mean, he was just the icon. He was awesome. But just to see him like that and get the autograph, of course, Dad was a little impatient waiting in line with me for that long. But we stuck it out and got the autograph. It was just, he was a good person, very decent.
That's a sweet story, Kim. Thanks for sharing it with us. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you for taking the call, Rich. Take care. Have a good night.
You too. Yeah, even Mama Zeoli chimed in that my uncle got to meet Hulk, waited in line to get his autograph. Hogan did a lot of charity events too. He did a lot of charity events for various groups. He was very generous and gracious with his time. And like I mentioned, it was, I think I saw that it was about a week ago or so that he officially, I guess, was baptized. So, it's a big loss. It was sad. I was actually texting with Greg Stocker earlier today about something else, and I was picking up my son from soccer, and he said to me, Hulk died. Hulk Hogan died. I said, oh my God. And then, you know, all of a sudden phone starts blowing up. It's like one of those things where all of a sudden everybody's talking about it and they drop everything and everybody goes to it. And I saw that even Fox News dropped all their programming, and people that I knew that were supposed to go on were getting bumped. And then, you know, next thing you know, you've got them taking the police conference live and everything else. So definitely an impact. Yes, Justin, thank you. Hulking up. That's the term for it. When the Hulk would hulk up, when his opponent would start shoving him, and he would seem to get stronger and stronger and stronger. But there's something, the success of that World Wrestling, what they built, what Linda McMahon built. That's why I know Linda McMahon is the right person who will tear down the Department of Education, because if she could build an empire, she can certainly tear down a government bureaucracy. You know what I mean? She can pile drive that government bureaucracy right into the ground, the Department of Education. She's one of the smartest people that I've ever met, ever. Linda McMahon, one of the smartest people. She was SBA administrator. She came on the show a lot back then in the first term, and now at the DOE. And then during the campaign, she came on the show a bunch of times. Kind and gracious, super rich, obviously. They built an empire. And part of building the empire was they told great stories, because they made these characters, they had the good guys and the bad guys. Remember, there was a period of time, too, when the Hulk was a bad guy. There was a little storyline with that, too. But ultimately, that was short-lived, and he'll be remembered as being the American fighter, the real American, the fighter. You know what I mean? So it was perfect that it was eclipsed with really his final big public appearance being that speech at the RNC when it backed President Trump and said, you know, you come after my president, you come after me, you come after all of us. You come after all the Trump-a-maniacs, the Hulkamaniacs, the Trump-a-maniacs. It was great stuff.